Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm feeling a lot more positive now. Anyway, back to this genre shit. In my last video about action games, I talked about how the character action genre wasn't really a thing. This made-up category was supposed to put action games with great melee combat mechanics in if they meet a nebulous, unquantifiable level of depth, so we can ignore the problems with titles that feature heavy combat, but don't have that same level of quality. With such nebulous and random requirements, the term basically becomes meaningless, like being good at something shouldn't make you part of a genre, right? You know, why can't any game just have good combat? Why is that exclusive now to one genre? Games like Devil May Cry 4 with amazing combat get justifiable flack for their sometimes lackluster level design. So, on the flip side, why can't any game get some criticism for dorky combat that ain't very good? Seems kind of lame to try and divvy every single type of game up so minutely so it's harder to compare them to each other. So when I saw people after the last video still trying to find a way to come up with another name for this fakey fake good combat genre, I wondered if some of you were perhaps missing the point slightly. Did you not hear what I said? They're just action games with really good combat. Action games with really good combat.
Action games with really good combat.
I don't think trying to separate games with good combat from other games really does action games as a whole much good. Because then certain games try to get away with stagnant combat and clunky fighting with the whole "we're not in that genre anymore" argument. Unlike some people who want games with good combat to be pared down until it's just rooms of enemies, I don't mind titles with great combat having exploration and extra features if they're fun and engaging. Let's dig into some other terms I've seen crop up and why I think they also don't really work to describe games with good combat. Right, so stylish action. Okay, so when I say a game is better if the combat is more complex, like Devil May Cry or something, I'm not saying the combat needs to be all flamboyant, or cocky, or crazy. I'm just saying there needs to be more to it, grounded or not. You can have a character behave any which way. Calculated, jokey, wacky, brutally, create whatever character you want for whatever tone you want. You see why you can argue that Dante does some quote-unquote stylish moves now and again, the word stylish appears on the screen, etc. I don't know if say stylish is the way I'd refer to say Ninja Gaiden. Ryu seems more efficient than he is showing off. Same with Raiden and Metal Gear Rising. What about DMC? I wouldn't call that a stylish game, but it still has technical swordplay mechanics in its own right, like other Devil May Cry games. How does stylish action account for games like the old God of Wars that were more about brutality than looking slick? And you just can't play something like God of War Ascension and tell me it doesn't have a lot of the same gameplay goals as these other action games. Base Donguri, one of the best DMC players ever, did stylish videos on those Tales games, and I've never heard people try and classify them alongside Devil May Cry. There are plenty of complex mechanical titles that let you use their deep mechanics to mess around and act stylish or crazy, but that doesn't make them a different kind of a game. Like MGS is still a stealth game just as much as any shallow stealth game, right? It's not a character action stealth game. Okay, we're kind of rehashing the last video now. Style is such a subjective thing. Is it stylish when a character kills an enemy and then the huge carcass falls to the ground behind him? Well, that kind of shit happens in New God of War, so is that game stylish action? I don't think you can measure genre based on how cool people are looking when you interact with it. Same goes for terms like spectacle fighter or crazy game. New God of War could be considered a spectacle, and plenty of games are crazy, like Vanquish, which is a third-person shooter. I feel equally unenthused by terms like beat 'em up and hack and slash to describe the good combat games. Dante uses a sword to hack and slash, and then sometimes he breaks out a bunch of fire fists and goes to town and beats them up. How can we file God Hand and Ninja Gaiden under the same label using these terms? We can't. One of them is in a literal sense a hack and slash, and the other is in a literal sense a beat 'em up. What about games like Yakuza? They never get mentioned alongside titles like DMC and Ninja Gaiden. Why? Because they have an open world or whatever to explore with role-playing side quests? Even though the mechanics are that of any other kind of action game that one would refer to as beat 'em up or hack and slash. Maybe not as deep, but they definitely have similar core gameplay. In fact, in certain titles under the Like a Dragon Yakuza label, the games use the same heat bar power-up system to put the focus on swordplay and even gunplay rather than fists. Even the regular Yakuza titles have swordplay, all of this under one umbrella. Yakuza Kenzan and Yakuza 1 still use the same basic systems, just in Kenzan you use a sword primarily, primarily, and in Yakuza you use your fists primarily. So calling one a hack and slash and the other a beat 'em up really helps very little in differentiating the gameplay between the two. So why is it so hard to categorize all of this then? It's because none of these games are solely beat 'em ups or hack and slashes or character action or stylish action or crazy games or spectacle fighters. They're just action games. Some better than others. Maybe, just maybe, we do Devil May Cry and Ninja Gaiden more justice by saying what they really are. The best action games you can find. Not the top of some niche clique of titles, but the top of the top. All this hair splitting just causes us problems. Are we not going to analyze the combat of Nier Automata because it has a few stats thrown in? Are we not going to praise Kingdom Hearts 2 for having technical as hell combat just because it's got RPG elements? Are we not going to give Nioh its dues for having more depth and mechanical complexity than the average Souls game, even if it shares some similarities to a title like that, that's further towards RPG on the action RPG spectrum? And are we not going to critique the combat in the new God of War because it has a different camera and some stats? No, it's all action and combat. I will judge all of it on the same terms. I'm not saying you should expect everything to be one way or everything to even be great, but I think it's all worth taking a look at and talking about. Getting all nitpicky like this about what a game can and can't do right or wrong depending on its genre doesn't interest me. I just want to see what can be done across the entire gamut of gameplay. Sometimes RPG-style mechanics don't improve a game, and that's just what I'm gonna say regardless of how you feel they alter its categorization. But sometimes adding elements to an action game outside of combat can improve the overall experience, and while New God of War's approach to that was walking and talking and armor, maybe we can aim for more action titles that play outside of the box, hitting home on multiple fronts, rather than just accepting that if they do a bunch of different things, they can slack off on putting effort into the combat. But regardless of all of this, whatever your game is mostly focused on, that's the thing that needs to hold up to the most scrutiny. And if that thing is action combat, that action better be trying to live up to any other game that is prepared to take it to its peak, regardless of whether or not you think jumping is gonna ruin the immersion of your story. Better stop making these kinds of videos. I didn't hate the new God of War that much, Thought I went pretty easy on it in the review, all things considered. Just wanted to make sure we're on the same page, and that you all know that I feel like it's perfectly acceptable for me to give its combat a cheeky dunking, Is there anything really that wrong with that, Did anyone get hurt? No. Whatever. Peace out.